to the July 11th Joint Conference Committee for Laguna Honda Hospital. Secretary Morowitz, will you take the roll?
Yes, I'll start with you, Commissioner Guillermo,
Present.
Commissioner Chow,
Present.
and Commissioner Green.
Present.
Thank you. We can move on to the land acknowledgement.
Okay,
The San Francisco Health Commission acknowledges that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who were the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush Ohlone community, and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. The second item on the agenda is the approval of the June 13th, 2023 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. See, is there public comment? Or should we take a motion and second before the comment?
Let's do the motions and then we can take public comment.
Moved.
Second.
Okay.
All right, and there is public comment. 1 second. Folks on the line, you've got 3 minutes, and your comment should relate to the minutes. That's the item we're on now. Caller, you're unmuted. Please let us know that you're there.
Yeah, it's Patrick Manetshaw, code AA.
Please begin, Mr. Manetshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Morowitz. I appreciate the public comments that appear in these JCC June 13 minutes. They demonstrate broad community interests of concern San Franciscans have expressed about the ongoing delays in obtaining Laguna Honda's recertification and resumption of admissions. In particular, these minutes include comments from Dr. Palmer, Michael Lyon, and in particular, Norm Dagelman, who the minutes show raised the question about whether newly hired Laguna Honda leaders will have the resources to support discharge of residents who no longer need SNF level of care. And he asked whether the leaders will be able to screen out inappropriate admission referrals. Mr. Persico questioned how soon Laguna Honda will be able to apply for recertification, and specifically asked how soon that will happen. And he went on to say, or to ask whether newly hired leaders will have the skills and resources to provide good quality services. He also asked a pointed question about the CMS 5-star ratings for the nursing homes Sandra Simon had been while administrator of those facilities, and if they're low, why they were low, and whether that was good enough for Laguna Honda. I urged Ms. Simon and Diltar Sidhu, Laguna Honda's new licensed assistant nursing home administrator, to print out the LHH JCC meeting minutes since April 2022 to educate themselves about the community's ongoing concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the only public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments or changes from members of the committee? None? Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
All right, thank you. The minutes are approved. We can move on to item 3, which is general public comment. Folks on the line, if you'd like to make comment, this is an item for topics that are not listed on the agenda. I see one hand. All right, caller, please let us know that you're there. Hello, caller, you're unmuted.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, good evening. How are you? Thank you for hearing me.
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. My name is Leela Harris. I'm a resident of San Francisco. I just want to say that I'm here to say that I hope that all is being done to make sure that Laguna Honda is recertified and that we keep all the beds. And I appreciate all the efforts so far, and I hope it's continuing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, see one other hand. Caller, please let us know that you're there.
I am. It's Patrick again, Mark.
All right, please begin. You've got 3 minutes.
I'm speaking, Commissioner Guillermo and Mr. Morwitz, about an issue that is not on today's agenda, so please don't cut me off. The JCC is the governing body for SFDPH, including the various subcommittees of this commission. This JCC has a poor track record of following up on issues and questions raised by the 3 commissioners assigned to the LHH JCC. For instance, and I repeat, this is not on today's agenda. One item I'm addressing is comments made by Commissioner Chow and Commissioner Guillermo during the Commission's Finance and Planning Subcommittee meeting on April 4th, in which both commissioners specifically asked that an update be presented to the JCC on the contract awarded for multiple SFDPH divisions. I'm referring to the quote-unquote Hoshin Connery, end quote, contract awarded to Moss Adams that pushed that contract to just $12,707 shy of being a $10 million contract for 3 years in a 3-week term. After 3 weeks, there's been no update on that contract presented to the JCC, and you should schedule that update for the very next meeting, as I asked you to during the June JCC meeting. As well, Commissioner Chow has twice requested in meetings that an updated Laguna Honda organization chart be produced for the JCC, given all of the recent hiring activities. I'm placing an oral records request today to obtain a readable and printable new Laguna Honda org chart. Thank you for your patience with my public comment.
Thank you. That is the last public comment under general public comment.
Okay, thank you for your comments. We'll continue.
Yes, item 4 is the executive team report.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. As usual, I am here in person, and most of the staff are joining us remotely back at Laguna Honda, where they're doing both, actually not really their regular jobs. We are to day 2 of our finishing up the action plan from our last 90-day monitoring survey, which is due to be submitted on tomorrow to CMS. So while they're taking a break, many of them from that task to join us remotely for this meeting, but they will be getting back to that task to finish up that action plan later this evening so we can submit it tomorrow. But also in the room with me, I am pleased to have with me our new nursing home administrator, chief executive officer for Laguna Honda, Ms. Sandra Simon. As I shared with you last time, she started with us on June 26th. That was her start date. Has been on board, is going through her required hospital orientation, training, onboarding, learning Laguna, learning all of our hundreds of policies and procedures which you all approve, you know very well. So she is getting acclimated, getting to meet all the leaders of the hospital, meeting residents and families, and being connected with me at the hip as we do a handoff and transition in leadership over the next coming period. So but wanted to have an opportunity for you to see Ms. Simon and introduce her to you. Good.
Welcome.
Okay.
Glad to have you.
Thank you. And so unless you feel differently, I told Ms. Simon she has the option to either sit for a little bit, but she's anxious to get back to the team to work on that action plan. So you'll probably see her scoot out shortly as I go through the presentation so that she can provide that leadership to the team as they're finalizing that action plan that's due tomorrow. So I pause if you want to do some before I move on to the agenda, if you'd like to have any other questions. Or
Right, well, thank you, Mr. Pickens, and again, welcome, Ms. Simon. We are very excited that we finally have you here in place and looking forward to your leadership and all of the things that are going to be moving forward with you at the helm at Laguna Honda.
So, Madam Chair, I wonder, since we recognize Ms. Simon will probably have to get back because of this very important report, if she might want to say a few words for.
Yes, I was just about to get there. Thank you.
I'll have to lower this. Hi, it's my pleasure to join this team. I've always had a long vision of coming and working for Laguna Honda. I've been in skilled nursing my whole career, from a nursing assistant through different ranks and a nursing home administrator, and always admired Laguna Honda from afar. And it's, sorry, this mask. It serves such a beautiful and service for the residents of San Francisco, and I'm just thrilled to be back and be a part of this team, and I look forward to the path to recertification and just together with the team that's joining me, leading us to a bright new future. So thank you. Thank you for allowing me to introduce myself. I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you again.
Any questions for me?
Well, I look to my fellow commissioners and see if there's any words of welcome or inquiry they would like to direct in the short time that I know that we have with you. Yes.
We're delighted you're here, and what has it been, about 10 days or something like that?
Right.
Any first impressions or sense of God's Hotel and your sense of being here? It's a wonderful team, I think.
Very dedicated, smart, amazing, dedicated team. I'm really excited to join this team that is, and having everybody rowing in the same direction is great, and with everybody with the goal for a path to recertification, and it's exciting to join in.
Wonderful.
Smart people.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Chow.
Well, I just also wanted to welcome you. I think that this will be a very important position that we see in order to not only meet recertification, but to move into this new phase of Laguna Honda's life. I think I recall, and one of the reasons that we were treating Laguna Honda as an acute care hospital was in part because of its distinct acute care side. And so much of the work that we had all been doing, which had not been criticized by the state, was to actually come under those rubrics. And up until this recent time, we basically were passing most of those guidelines. I guess with the new phase 3 and perhaps leadership at the CMS level, wanting to have, and it's wonderful for us to have even improved services for the residents, that this move to make us really a world-class Laguna Honda, to show that we can do that once again, just like for our acute hospital at SF General, we're going to again have a superb example of serving the public in a long-term care facility, and that we can do that. So I'm hoping that you feel that you will have our support, and that your approach in leadership will be one that will incorporate the wonderful staff we have, but yet be firm and strong to get us to that next level. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. I agree. The recertification is step one, but then we continue our work and the culture change and the processes that are put into place to become a center of excellence. And it is a distinct part, so it does have the acute care, but it has the skilled nursing. And I've managed a distinct part SNF here in San Francisco in a previous life, so I look forward to continuing on that journey with all of you. Thank you for your support.
On behalf of my colleagues here and the full commission, we welcome you, and we actually do look forward to being able to see you in action at Laguna Honda as soon as we achieve recertification and are able to remand ourselves back to that location. So go forth and take care of business, I guess.
Thank you, thank you. It's a bright future. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandra. And again, welcome. Okay, we'll return to the presentation slide. Okay, next slide. So continuing with the presentation, I've introduced Sandra Simon, our new nursing home administrator and CEO. We've also filled the 2 assistant nursing home administrator positions. Ms. Jennifer Carton-Wade is our new and inaugural assistant nursing home administrator for care experience, covering the areas of patient grievances, staff care experience, satisfaction, and the environment of care at the institution. Ms. Carton-Wade actually has been at Laguna for the last many years, leading those efforts, and really stepped up to the plate during this whole recertification process, particularly to make sure that we maintain a focus on care experience both for our residents and our staff through this very troubling time over the last 18 months. She is in the process of going through the state certification process for that nursing home administrator certification, which is a requirement of her hire within the next 12 months. And so we'll be monitoring that. But she meets the qualifications for the position, and we're excited about having her on board. We are also welcoming Mr. Diltar Sidhu. Diltar is a currently licensed nursing home administrator. He comes to us most recently from a facility in the East Bay, which is part of a organization of skilled nursing facilities. Very experienced. He is an engineer by background who came into healthcare say 10 or 15 years ago. So he brings a unique skill, particularly with a focus on data science and analytics, in addition to his nursing home administrator skills. He is our assistant nursing home administrator for support services, so environmental services, food and nutrition services, clinical dietary, all those important support functions that don't live within the nursing chain of command. And finally, the other new hire is Mr. Greg Chase. You'll recall Greg had previously been at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital as the chief engineer. Back in December, when we had our survey and had challenges regarding fire life safety, Greg is a certified fire life safety expert. He has been at Laguna since December, focused initially on fire life safety, but more recently has filled this inaugural position of Executive Director of Facilities that covers not only fire life safety, but all of the facilities and engineering functions. And just Greg represents further integration of the San Francisco Health Network in that he occupies a position held, his counterpart at Zuckerberg is Terry Saltz. So we're bringing the same level of expertise and structure that we have at San Francisco General over to Laguna so that there's some consistency and standardization across the network and the department. And so we are excited about having these new leaders on the team, and all of them are on working right now, again, on that action plan that's due tomorrow. Next slide. In addition to those key positions, we are also moving forward with other key leadership positions. The Director of Nursing Services, that position has been out for recruitment. We are working on having the search firm identify additional candidates for consideration, and we'll move forward to review those candidates. Our goal is to hopefully have a pool to review sometime in August. We continue to have Terry D'Antoni serve as our interim and acting nursing director, and she will continue in that role at least up until we identify a new person. And similar to myself, once that person is identified, Terry will also remain on site to help support through recertification, because we want to make sure that we sustain the gains that we've made so far. In terms of the medical director position, interviews for that position are actually happening next week. And we are, next week? Yes. And we're looking forward to hopefully getting that position filled. One of the things I shared with you early on is that we want to make sure we're making the right hires. So we are definitely reserving the option that if we feel there are not sufficiently qualified candidates that go through the process, we may indeed then have to go back out to source additional candidates, which is what we did for the Director of Nursing Services. And then finally, the Director of Emergency Management and Disaster Preparedness. That is a new position that's been added to Laguna. You'll also recall that was one of the areas of deficiency identified in the root cause analysis. So again, this is a new resource that we have infused into the organization in order to provide that critical leadership that had historically been lacking, and that was one of the contributing factors to the decertification status that occurred last April. And I think the important thing about all these positions is that they are being structured in a way that is consistent with high-performing skilled nursing facilities and continue along the path that we've been on with our consultants in terms of restructuring the leadership team, which is why Ms. Simon has a title of both Nursing Home Administrator and Chief Executive Officer, with Nursing Home Administrator being first to recognize the importance of focusing on the skilled nursing component of the operation, but also recognizing we are still a licensed acute care hospital with the CEO structure. So it's actually covering both requirements from a regulatory position. Next slide. And this is just to familiarize anyone who may be attending the meeting who hasn't been a part of our journey the last 18 months. Our recertification is happening due to a decertification that occurred in April of last year. Since that time, we have been working feverishly, both with our own internal staff and a series of external consultants, not only consultants of our own, but also consultants supported by the California Department of Public Health, to really make sure that we are addressing all identified gaps in regulatory compliance and patient safety, to make sure that Laguna can regain its status as a CMS approved and certified facility. Next slide. You will recall that upon that initial decertification in April of last year, we went through a series of required steps, including a transfer and closure plan that was approved by CMS and initially implemented, but then after some initial transfers of residents from Laguna to other facilities, that closure plan was halted and paused by virtue of a settlement agreement between the city and county and CMS and CDPH. That settlement agreement extended funding for Laguna Honda, and also a pause in doing additional transfers or discharges. You recall more recently, on May 18th of this year, CMS agreed to the city's request to continue that pause beyond the May, at that time, date for expiration of the pause. And so now we have at least until September 19th for a continuation of the pause. Again, it's important to recognize that the settlement agreement always gives CMS the they reserve the right to extend pauses in the future. Although they have made it very clear to us, it's not their intention to approve additional pauses and are encouraging us to move forward towards recertification as quickly as possible. That most recent pause also extended payments in the event that we were not certified in the near term. It extended payments through March 19th of 2024. It is, as I've been saying all along, and we'll end this presentation in a few more slides, we are still on our path towards submitting for recertification as quickly as possible. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the factors that are being considered to help us make that decision. But just wanted to share we are still on the path that we've previously said, which is to apply sometime later this summer. Next slide. So I mentioned at the beginning that staff are feverishly working on the action plan for the third CMS 90-day monitoring survey, which took place June 5th through June 9th. A little under 2 weeks ago, we received the formal, about 10 days ago, we received the formal 2567 Statement of Deficiencies, which was very consistent with their verbal exit. There were approximately 40 findings in that Statement of Deficiency. And again, that's significantly less than the 130 odd findings that were from the 90-day monitoring survey number 1. The CMS quality improvement expert, per the requirements of the settlement agreement, has already conducted a root cause analysis on those 40 findings. And it's important to note that many of those findings had already been previously covered in previous root cause analyses and in our previous action plans. So we've been able to actually, in cases where there was a finding that had been seen previously, we were able to update those particular parts of the root cause analysis and develop milestones that built upon any areas that had not yet been corrected. That action plan is due to CDPH and CMS tomorrow. So staff have been working the last 10 days, long night last night, and probably another long night tonight in order to get that out and ready for submission tomorrow. Next slide. Again, this represents just a visual representation of our timeline. It shows the original decertification, all the work we've done in the last 18 months in terms of process improvement with the initial mock surveys, various 90-day surveys, and at the bottom are scheduled to still be prepared for submission for recertification sometime later this summer. Next slide. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to update you on our compliance with CMS regulations related to restraints, which, as you recall, is one of the major focuses of the new Phase 3 requirements. CMS in the skilled nursing environment has been on what they call a restraint-free journey, really for over 20 years, where they have been systematically encouraging and promoting the use of interventions other than physical restraints in the skilled nursing environment. That 20-year journey, unfortunately, did not occur at Laguna. Laguna continued to use restraints up until more recently, particularly with Phase 3, where we've really then had to bring in additional resources to help us figure out how do we move toward a restraint-free environment. A few months ago, I believe the total was there were about 700 or 800 restraints in use at Laguna Honda Hospital. And the most recent data shows, I think we're down to only a couple of hundred, which means there's been a lot of work with the consultants, with our staff, to then retool their mindset of how do you approach residents who have conditions that in the past have required a restraint, but now require looking at other interventions, be it lift bars as opposed to raised bed rails, or wedge cushions, other things that don't require a physical restraining of individuals. When you look at the literature that's particularly been provided to us by the experts from CDPH and CMS, it actually shows that the literature shows that actually more harm comes from the use of restraints than not using restraints, which is, when you think about it, it's kind of hard to rationalize. You know, you think I'm putting this restraint up in order to help this resident stop from falling. But when you look at the data, it shows that, you know, residents actually get entangled in bars and have very poor outcomes and harm, and in some cases death. We were hosted by the California Department of Public Health, has provided a technical advisor to Laguna Honda. She is like one of the lead regulatory surveyors for CDPH. She came out to Laguna about 2 weeks ago and conducted a town hall for all of our staff to hear their questions and to explain to them what the requirements are regarding restraints. And so it was a very productive session, and I think our staff really appreciated the opportunity to express their concern, but also hear from the regulators themselves of what the requirements are that if we intend to become recertified, we have to meet. Next slide. And part of many of the restraints historically at Laguna have to do with the beds that our residents are in and the use of bed rails on the side of the beds. And so we are actually a major improvement effort. We're undergoing the process of switching out the old beds, which are not compliant, with new compliant beds that may not have the side rails, but have other assisted devices like a lift assist and other things, and the use of wedges and pillows and cushions and other things. So this is a picture of that session I talked about where the CDPH consultant came out and met with our staff and to really help us as we move forward in our journey towards a restraint-free environment. We don't anticipate we will be 100% restraint-free in the near future. So there are very few small exceptions to the restraint process, but they require significant medical justification and documentation. And so part of this process is to then educate and train our staff. But you also have to show you've tried other means other than the restraint. So we're also then making sure that we're educating and training staff how to do the appropriate assessments, alternative trials, and documentation, so that in those rare instances where restraint might still be used, that we meet the regulatory requirement and it won't become a finding in our next survey process. Next slide. And finally, just sharing our usual report of statistics showing status of admissions, discharges, and expirations. As of this report date in June 23, we were at a patient census of 511. And as you know, our licensed bed capacity is 787. Next slide. So that concludes my presentation, and at the appropriate time, I'm happy to take questions or hear comments from commissioners.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pickens. Are there any public comments?
Yes, just to remind the folks who are watching, we're on item 4, the executive team report. If you'd like to make a comment about this item, please press *3. I see 2 hands. I'll go in the order I see. Caller, you're unmuted. Please let us know that you're there.
I am. It's Patrick. Can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Again, I offer congratulations to Ms. Simon for starting as the CEO and nursing home administrator, she will need to tread water around Laguna Honda's legacy managers still employed who were directly responsible for the decertification 15 months ago. So need to keep a close eye on Jennifer Carton Wade, who many former Laguna Honda employees didn't think highly of. Indeed, according to CDPH's licensing and certification online credential applet, Carton Wade doesn't possess nursing home administrator in California, and it's unclear how far along she may potentially be in the administrator and training program. After a nationwide search to fill Laguna Honda's 2 assistant nursing home administrator positions, LHH residents deserved to have someone chosen with years of licensed experience under their belt, not Ms. Carton Wade. Laguna Honda's restraint reduction initiative started decades ago while I was an employee. That it remains problematic is troubling. How many patients need quote-unquote equivalent bed exchange, and at what cost? Is that a capital expense? Is it just for mobility devices or entirely new beds? It's kind of ironic hearing Commissioner Green call Laguna Honda God's Hotel, because that book clearly demonstrated that the problems at Laguna Honda were related largely to the nursing department and the nursing department failures. And it's kind of infuriating hearing Commissioner Chow blather about Laguna Honda having followed acute care hospital guidelines. I remind Commissioner Chow there's only 11 acute care beds, and that ignores the 769 bed distinct part SNF beds that should never have been neglected, and that neglect led to the decertification of the hospital. So between God's Hotel and this whiny excuse about acute care guidelines is just so misguided, so far into attempting recertification. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have one more hand up. Caller, please let us know that you're there. Caller? All right, let me try again. Caller, you're unmuted. Please let us know that you're there.
Mark, it's Patrick. You've got the wrong caller.
Okay, thank you. All right, caller, are you there?
Yeah, it's been me. It's Dr. Palmer, WW. I understand that Jennifer Carton Wade is not licensed and did preside over the mess that Laguna Honda is now in for many years, and so that is not reassuring. I am very pleased and grateful that the latest survey did come without imminent jeopardy or actual harm, but I'm still very worried that there's an impressive absence of an RN on the ward who knows what is actually going on with the patients and is actually effectively supervising patient care assistants and home health aides. There's also a lack of one-to-one coaches where they're needed for safety. And putting in new equipment like restraint-free beds isn't going to make up for a lack of staff that knows what's going on and is and licensed staff that is supervising unskilled staff. So I really hope you're hiring generously and that you're getting sufficient licensed staff. I would also like to know how long you think the state is going to take to vet the new milestones and action plan, and when recertification will actually be applied for, and how that relates to the September 19th closure and evictions. If you apply for recertification, will the eviction September 19th be suspended or not? The people of San Francisco who are waiting for readmissions to start and don't want their loved ones dispersed out of town to die really do need to know this. Thank you very much.
Those are the only two public comments for this item.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to members of the JCC questions. Dr. Chow?
Yes, I actually thank you for the report, and also thank you for the org chart that shows quite clearly what the different roles are for your assistant administrators, obviously similar to what you just described, but it is nice to be able to see as a flow. I asked Mr. Moritz if we could print it a little bigger, because he sent it, yeah.
The print is still this when I printed it, so unfortunately, I've asked the Laguna Honda folks when they're done with the milestones to see if they can enlarge it on their end.
Okay, but I did read it on my little phone, and I found it quite useful, really, and very helpful, and it also showed where some of your vacancies are and where some of the temporary, and I think importantly also showed its integration with the rest of the health network, and the fact that we're trying to align best practices in our different systems. So that really is very helpful and reassuring. I was wondering, in the action plan that you're dealing with, and that there are 40 findings, and you mentioned that a number of them were findings that are in the same category as what we already had. How many those were, and therefore that's one group in which we already know where the issues are and we need to put more effort into it, versus brand new ones?
Right. That's a great question. I didn't bring the action plan here with me, but I believe that our Chief Quality Officer, Naz Talai, will be covering that in her performance improvement update, because all of those activities are covered under performance improvement, and so will be covered under that agenda item.
All right. Yeah, no, that'll be fine. And you're continuing after that survey to feel that you're staying on your same time frame, because that was where you were last time, saying, depending upon the results of this June survey, you would have a more comfortable feeling about trying for this summer. And you are still holding to that.
I am, and I'm glad that when I was here previously, we had not received the 2567. Now we have, so that plan is due tomorrow. Where we are now is we are hoping that CMS and CDPH will quickly turn it around and either approve it or quickly let us know if they want changes or edits. You will know from the second monitoring survey that went back and forth for about 2 months. We don't have that time, that luxury now. We need for them to turn this around so that we can stay on our schedule for recertification submission later this summer. If they delay it, then that potentially then throws, because we don't want to apply until they've, number one, approved our correction plans, and that we've had enough time to implement those corrections and to make sure that they stick. So assuming that they will turn it around quickly, 10 days would be wonderful. We are still in good position to meet our original timeline.
All right. Good. Thank you.
Any others? Dr. Green?
Thank you for all the information, the presentation. I wonder if you can elaborate a little more on this timeline, because what kind of political or relationship pressures can we bring to bear? I'm a little concerned since it's summer. I don't know if a lot of the people who are otherwise evaluating the corrective action plan may be on vacation. And just wondering how many hands that has to pass through, if we even know that, and what we can realistically expect given summer that they might get back to us as quickly as we'd like?
Right. Yeah, so thank you for that question. Because of the last pause that was approved by CMS and that September 19th date, I think that in and of itself puts the pressure within their system to help move us towards recertification sooner than later. Dr. Colfax and myself were on the phone with the CMS and HHS leadership today and discussing the importance of this quick turnaround on our 2567, on our action plan, so that it can then give us the runway we need to implement those corrections so that we can submit at the end of the summer. So the discussions about the need for timeliness are happening at the highest levels of not only CMS but also HHS. So, I obviously can't officially speak on their behalf, but there are enough people in the places that matter who understand the timeline we're under, and so I'm confident that they will help anybody underneath them in the chain to push the process forward.
Thank you. Is there anything also about the fact that we have 40 findings as opposed to more? I would think they would be able, and some of these are, as you've said, elaborations on things we've already worked on. Do you think that might help hasten their turnaround?
Yes, we're very hopeful because, as you know, all of the root cause analyses, which were 3 from the surveys and then 2 additional ones from other survey visits, were all building upon the other. So and so all of the milestones and corrective actions were complementary and cumulative. So to the extent that there were findings of those 40 that were identified previously, they were identified because the fixes we had put in place hadn't had enough time to really stick, and had we, say, had another 2 or 3 weeks, more than likely may not have resulted in a finding. And so in the putting together this action plan that's due tomorrow, working with the CMS QIE, we've taken that into account and said, hey, this was identified in our last action plan. We've got more recent data to show it either is or isn't, and in most cases, it is improving. And so that's what we're submitting, to just say, you found this, but we just implemented the corrective action a week before you came. Now we're 6 weeks into it, and we think we have the solution at hand. We just needed more time to have it in place.
That's good to hear. Thank you so much. And then the last question I had, looking at the discharges, where do we stand on the, I think it was 41 residents maybe that don't qualify for SNF anymore? I know there's an elaborate process in place to help these people get proper placement, and I'm wondering if any of the 4 were among those, or where we are on that journey.
Sure. So yes, when we first started, we had the direction from CMS and HHS in March to begin to discharge those individuals. At that time, there were 42 individuals. As of July 7th, there are 38 individuals who are in that category. We have had a total of 9 discharges since April of these individuals who no longer meet skilled nursing level of care. Of those 9, 7 have gone to board and care facilities, 1 went home, and then 1 went to scattered site housing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one last question from myself. Given Ms. Simon's sort of recent joining of the leadership at Laguna Honda, I'm assuming, though, that as we move on from here, and depending on how recertification goes, that we will continue, though, to get the executive team reports from you rather than Ms. Simon. I feel like it would be important for that continuity from this whole process to be part of the report back to us, and for us to feel I guess the partnership that we have formed with you, Mr. Pickens, as this has gone on, and also with your management team, is something that I think would be really important to stay consistent until we've sort of gotten where we would like to go in this very important milestone, and then going forward from there, all the other very important follow on and new milestones we can take, as they come. But
Absolutely. I'm committed to staying involved, as is the team that came from DPH and the network. We will be there through recertification, still on site at Laguna on a daily basis as we are now. And, be it Ms. Simon or anyone else, Laguna Honda is the second largest skilled nursing facility in the country. So I don't care how much experience you have in an organization of that size and complexity. You can be the smartest person in the world, but it takes time to learn the organization, to learn its policies and procedures, to learn its staff, to learn its residents. So again, normally we don't have the luxury of having two people at the helm at the same time, but we do now. And so Ms. Simon and I will be joined at the hip. Everything I'm involved, every decision we are both involved in, and so she is going to have a very thoughtful onboarding and a transition in leadership. But again, I will be there through recertification, as will my team, for the next several months to come.
okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Dr. Shen.
Yeah, I was just actually curious. You now have said that Laguna is the second largest in the country. So which is the largest?
So there is a facility in New York State, which is actually a government-owned facility. In my understanding, they actually have more beds than Laguna. I can get you the name of that facility.
Just out of interest, because we've always been sort of toying around with we are large or we're one of the largest.
Right.
Now you've got to hone down to be interesting to understand, who and what the other organization is.
Right. So we'll make a point to get that to Mark to give you that citation.
Thank you.
Okay. You can continue.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Pickens. Item 5 is the hiring and vacancy report. And we have Sherry, I think, Sudo on the line.
Hi, yes, my name is Sherry Suto, and I was the acting Laguna Honda HR operations manager. I'd like to introduce our new manager who started on June 26th. Hi, Priya. Her name is Priya Nayar, who is on the call today. I'll be continuing with the report out for this month, but Priya will be presenting going forward. Thank you, Priya. Welcome aboard again. So the Laguna Honda vacancies decreased in July to 11.5% from 12.3% in June. We've hired a total of 21 employees between June 1st and June 30th, 2023 in various classifications and had 17 separations during the same period, with 12 of those being retirements. The RN vacancy rate decreased to 9% in July from 9.2% in June. The hiring managers are making selections from a refreshed long-term care eligible list. We have 18.5 RN vacancies to fill. HR conducts regular vacancy meetings with program and hiring managers to review hiring. We are in the planning stages for a 2303 patient care assistant hiring event in August. Some RN highlights are 5 2320 registered nurses and 4 P103 are targeted to start in July. 10943 Laguna Honda Nursing Home Administrator was appointed in June, as Roland mentioned, and also as Roland already mentioned, the Laguna Honda Assistant Nursing Home Administrator, both of them were appointed in June. One is for care experience and one is for support services. We have an 0932 Director of Integrated Rehabilitation Services appointed in June. We have our Human Resources Operations Manager, Priya Nayar, who was appointed in June. 2 2324 nursing supervisors were appointed in June. One 7334 stationary engineer was appointed in June. 52312 LVNs were appointed in June. 2 are targeted to start in July. 52604 food service workers were targeted to start in July. We have 92303 patient care assistants hired in the month of June. 6 targeted to start July 22nd, and 3 targeted to start on August 5th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Let's see, do we have public comment?
Yes. So we're on item 5, the hiring and vacancy report. If you'd like to make comment, press star 3. I see one hand now. Caller, please let us know that you're there. You're unmuted.
I am. It's Patrick. Can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Regarding this vacancy report, comparing the run data between June 1st and June 31st, it shows there had been an increase of 25 additional budgeted FTE positions at Laguna Honda. But because the Board of Soups have not yet finalized and adopted the new 2-year budget for the city, that may not include the additional 14 new positions being added to Laguna Honda staff in the fiscal year 23-24 and fiscal year 24-25 budget cycles shown in the Laguna Honda quote-unquote program change request form I obtained under public records. It also does not include all 6 of the new stationary engineer positions in job class 7334 that were announced elsewhere. How many new staff are actually being hired to ensure Laguna Honda's recertification application, meaning how many new positions and new FTEs are actually being hired that may not be reflected yet on this vacancy report? Thank you.
That is the only hand that I see.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commissioners on the HR report? Yes, Dr. Bree.
Yes, I wondered if you can remind us what you're doing about staffing ratios, given that on the one hand, the number of residents continues to drop, but we also know that with recertification will come readmission. I thought I had heard earlier that you're actually maintaining staff in anticipation. I just wondered if that is the case.
I'll try to take that. So we are definitely maintaining staff and continuing with hiring. Even though we are at a census of I think it was 511, we have not decreased our budgeted staffing, nor have we stopped any of our hiring. So we continue to hire as if we were still at full census. We think that's important because we do anticipate being successful in recertification and want to make sure we have sufficient staff on board when we are able to again resume admissions.
Thank you. And then I guess one other correlate I perhaps forgot to ask as part of the executive report is I believe we got a very elaborate org chart via email just a few hours ago. When will that be posted to the DPH website so the public can see it?
Sure, we're happy to post it. I guess we want to make sure that we can get the writing big enough so that people can print it, but happy to post it as soon as it's ready.
Commissioner Chow will proofread that for you.
I'm sure he will. Do you have
Thank
any
you.
questions, Dr.
Yeah, no, it looks, it actually looks quite good. Thank you. You just need to explain the shaded bar, the shaded boxes a little. But lines of authority are clearly on there. I had 2 questions. One was more philosophical, but one technically. In the Director of Integrated Rehabilitation Services, which belongs to the Health Network, how does that then integrate with, using the same word, the rehabilitation services at, Laguna? And then there is, as we see in the policies and procedures, there is also, services happening on the ward via the nursing services, right? So what role does that particular person play, or is that role more in moving patients?
Oh, okay. So if Baljeet is on, I'll let him answer it. If not, I can provide it because that position reports up to him through the network.
I don't see his name.
Okay, I'll answer then. So you recall, Dr. Chow, when we first set up the network back in 2013, integrating rehab services across the network was the first area that we actually consolidated. So because we have rehab at San Francisco General, Laguna Honda, we also have some therapists out in jail health across the network. We decided that was the first area that we would consolidate so that they could have shared resources to be able to deploy where they were needed the most. So this individual has responsibility for rehab across all the institutions. You remember that for many years, Laguna Honda only provided rehab services for patients at Laguna. As part of the network organization, they now provide outpatient rehab for network patients. So you could be a patient at Chinatown Public Health or San Francisco General, and if the first available outpatient appointment is for outpatient at Laguna, then that's where you go for your rehab. So it's an example. So this individual oversees, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, anywhere those services exist within the Department of Public Health.
Okay, thank you. The second question actually is related to the same that, or close to Dr. Green's question. The PCA numbers that we have, that's the largest block that really has vacancies, and you filled about 9 out of 42 from the list anyway, which I guess, fluctuates somewhat. I'm assuming the 42 was before these hires. But there are also home health aides of some sort that are also high. So are these positions being filled then on a temp basis, or they represent vacancies so that they also represent sort of pressure on the staff that doesn't have this in each of the neighborhoods?
So is Terry D'Antoni on?
No. Oh, yes, Terry is there.
Yeah.
Hi, Commissioners. So specifically, what's your question, Dr. Chow?
It was that because we have the vacancies in the PCA and the home health aides, and I'm not sure the home health aides are, involved with the care of the neighborhood, are some of those positions filled so that staff at the neighborhood level is adequately staffed, or that this is sort of extra work on the staff right now and might be an additional burden on them as they try to, incorporate the new learnings from the recertification effort?
So thank you. Great question. We monitor staffing daily. We are held to CDPH standards of an hours per patient day of 3.5 for a 24-hour period. We exceed that by, we're usually at 4. We strive for 4. We are okay on the units with PCAs and home health aides. When we have a backlog or we don't, we get registry. So we have registry, we have our permanent civil service, and we also have as needed. It is a very difficult time in the city, and talking to my colleagues in acute and in long-term care, that there are a lot of vacancies because people have not recovered in healthcare enough to want to come back for these type of jobs. And I know that we're looking at ways to get them in. To answer your direct question, no, it's not impacting the units because we replace them with as needed and registry.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that's the extent of the questions. We can move on.
Yes, so we can move on to item 6, the regulatory affairs report.
Commissioners. This is Geraldine Mariano, Director of Regulatory Affairs, and I will be sharing the Regulatory Affairs report for Laguna Honda. This report reflects activity for the month of June 2023. We reported 26 facility reported incident to CDPH for the month of June. We also had completed our third monitoring survey, as Roland stated in his report. And we have received the 2567, and we were partnering with our consultants to do the root cause analysis and action plans to be submitted to CMS in response to the 2567. We had 2 unannounced site visits from CDPH for June to follow up of facility reported investigations. And from that visit, we received their preliminary outcomes from their investigation, and we have found 6 preliminary deficiencies, and we began drafting our corrective action. We have not received the written 2567 at this date from those preliminary outcomes. Please let me know if there are any questions or comments, as I can address it at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mariano. Are there any comments?
Let's see. I have a feeling. Yes, I see one hand. Make sure, yes. Mr. Manette Shaw, you've been unmuted. Please let us know that you're there.
Thank you, Mr. Morowitz. The top of page 1 of this regulatory affairs report says that there were 26 facility reported cases to CDPH in June. The first discussion bullet point says there were 23 allegations of abuse, but the sub-bullets only add up to 22 incidents, not 23. Additionally, the 3 main bullet points add up to 27 incidents, not the 26 FRIs reported. The math simply doesn't add up. As well, the first paragraph says that FRIs reported in June included quote-unquote adverse events. Did an adverse event actually occur in June? The regulatory report also says Laguna Honda received 2 verbal deficiencies in June. This does not bode well for Laguna Honda's plans to submit an application for recertification and resume admissions to Laguna Honda. Also, the bar graph on page 3 showed 218 FRIs were submitted in 2022 and 67 were submitted in the first 6 months of calendar year 2023, for a total of 285 in the past 18 months. You really need to work with DHHS and CMS to get sufficient funding provided to CDPH for them to review each of these FRIs on a timely basis. It's ridiculous that there's 218 FRIs that have been submitted, but page 3 shows that they haven't even started investigating those 218. Thank you.
Great. It's the only public comment for that item.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the members? Yes, Commissioner Green.
Yes, thank you for your report. I just had one quick question about the lack of anonymous complaints. It seems that that's out of sync with our normal trends. And I wondered, I understand we don't know about those until we're informed by CDPH, but do we have any concerns that at some point we'll suddenly get a significant number and be scrambling, or do we have any sense for whether actually we don't have any, or whether there's a delay somehow in the fact that they're not reported to us until CDPH decides to report them? It kind of goes along the line of some of the delays in giving us outcomes for these fries.
Actually, oh, sorry, Nas.
Go ahead, Geraldine.
Actually, Commissioner, we had a slew of anonymous complaint, I think, back in January. And typically, we were informed of the anonymous complaint once they get here. Yeah.
So do we think that there simply weren't any, or that it's going to be another January and August or something?
I will just add, I think it's hard to know that for certain. To Geraldine's point, the anonymous complaints are often the cases that CDPH follows up on immediately. There's very minimal delay once they receive an anonymous complaint to when they connect with the facility. So having had none this month does make me think that there were not any. However, we don't want to assume because we don't know their process.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chow, do you have a question?
Well, yeah, it's similar to Commissioner Guillermo. You're pointing out, and it doesn't look like we're making much progress in terms of the listing of investigation now started. It's rather startling. It continues to go back for over a year and a half, and so it's very difficult for us to try to maintain compliance with them if they don't tell us what we're out of compliance with. And I think that hopefully either, not sure what you're going to do with something that goes all the way back to April of 2021. And there's a whole block of those that haven't been looked at. So I did want to comment, I think, on the comment of the commenter, public testimony, that the 26 numbers at least add up correctly, and that the only error seems to be in counting the allegations of abuse. That therefore allows us to be comfortable that instead of 23, there were only 22. But there were 26 allegations according to this. But thank the caller for being so good in math.
Thank you. And yes, I would just, I know we say this at every meeting, but, the concern about the CDPH not following up or not even starting investigations on previous fries. There's a part of me, I think, that sort of then lacks confidence about what we might end up seeing in the future as those 2.5-year-old fries the investigation start on things that may not even be relevant anymore, as we are moving towards certification or receive recertification. And so I don't know what kind of discussions you can have about those, but it is something that just it's sort of a cloud that hangs over. It's hard to know how impactful that's going to be for the future, whether we achieve recertification sooner versus later.
So thank you and Commissioner Chow for that comment and the inquiry. And it's very timely. In fact, Naz and I were on the phone with CDPH on this very issue a couple of days ago. So Naz, would you like to update the commissioners on that conversation?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So as Roland alluded to, we had a call with CDPH leadership just last week. And the discussion was the number of outstanding facility reported incidences that are well over 150 and that date back to 2020. So the conversation was two-part. One, Laguna Honda has supplied our internal tracker, meaning all the cases that we show you here are open or pending. We've shared that information with CDPH and asked if they could please cross-check it on their end. So we want to make sure our information is accurate. And part of that being, as we've done this and learned, they have closed out cases unbeknownst to us. So there's that cross-check occurring. In addition, CDPH has shared with Roland and I that they do have to prioritize closing out all our cases in support of our being in compliance and certification process. So we are now awaiting follow-up from them in regards to what their plan will be, as much as they're allowed and able to share with us, of how they will begin to follow up on those over 160 cases. It was expressed and shared to them that, of course, when they come on site, it impacts the entire facility, in particular quality management, who we devote our full time to them being here. Their prior practice was to do 25 cases at a time, and they would be here, for a week, every other week, a different team. So we shared our feedback. I feel they heard us, and the next step is for them to circle back with potentially, I think, a proposed plan of how they might begin to close out these incidences, as well as being mindful that the facility is trying to respond to everything else in the efforts of certification.
I appreciate that and glad to hear that there is some proactive discussions going on. And please keep us updated on anything that you might hear from CDPH as to the resolution of those open or the mitigation, I guess, based on whose records are accurate. So, okay.
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask the one question, and maybe this is an improvement in awareness, but in your last chart on the resident allegations of staff to resident, it looks like there was an uptake in May, or considerable uptake, and none. Well, now there are 10 of those that still haven't been, done by the state, which. You would think the state would think these were of high priority also. But is there some reason that that's such a high uptake compared to, going all the way back? I see that only back in 2019 does it look like we had as high, and that you've kind of looked into that.
Sure, I'll start and then ask Naz to follow up. So I mentioned that California Department of Public Health provided that technical expert, Dana Forney, who most recently came to meet with us about restraint requirements. Dana came to meet with us and our staff back, I believe, in February about abuse and abuse reporting. And the fact that we needed to make sure that we were doing timely and appropriate reporting. So there was a concerted education to remind staff of their obligation as mandatory reporters of both the timeliness and the fact that they do need to report any suspicions of abuse. And so we think part of that uptake is because of the focused effort we had on re-educating staff as to their obligations and the fact that we had CDPH on site to drive that home. But Naz, anything else you want to add?
Thanks, Roland. I would reiterate, I think for the past several months, in particular since April, since QM has taken over the investigations, there's been a lot of just-in-time education with unit staff. There's also been a significant increase in resident check-ins completed by the quality management staff as well. So any incidences that come to our attention during those check-ins are also then reported as appropriately per protocol. So that has attributed to that increase. And I apologize, it's hard on that graph to see. It's actually been for the month of June is when we saw that significant increase in staff to resident allegations of abuse. We've also seen a slight correlation between registry staff and the allegations, in particular for residents who they just very much prefer their routine staff. And so when they have staff who is a registry staff, it can sometimes cause for a challenging dynamic, and also allegations will come from that as well. We saw that pattern in our review of the cases during June.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Okay. Now we can move on to policies and procedures.
Yes, item 7, policies and procedures.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Carmen Trin, and I will be presenting the policy and procedures today. So we have a total of 18 policy and procedures, 5 hospital-wide. They're all revisions. The first one is 20-01, admission to Laguna Honda acute and SNF services and relocation between Laguna Honda SNF units. We removed mentions of UCSF and renumbered sections. Next one is 22-01, abuse and neglect prevention, identification, investigation, protection, reporting and response. We added registry stats and updated QM. Regulatory Affairs will conduct investigation. Next one is 73-03 Hazard Communication Program. We updated to current practice, which includes quarterly updates of hazardous chemicals and added procedures for reporting and responding to spills or unintended consequences to employee training. 73-15 Ergonomics Program, updated to current practice, which includes annual ergonomic training and preference for vinyl chairs. And the last one is 73-17 Hazardous Energy Control Procedures, lockout, tag out, minor grammar updates, and we removed the energization or throughout the whole policy. We had a new department, Biomed Engineering, creating their all new policy. So there are 12 new policies under their department. The first one is acceptance testing of device and computer maintenance management system, equipment inventory additions, alternative resources for medical equipment, annual evaluation of the effectiveness of the medical equipment management program, defective equipment and device reporting, tagging and removal services, hazard alerts and recall notices, medical equipment failures, emergency repair services, and emergency preparedness management plan, medical equipment management plan, the MEP, outside vendor assistance, patient care area definition, PHI security and data sanitation, plan maintenance and on-time completion, and the last one is Safe Medical Device Act. And we also have one more departmental revision. It's under nursing. The policy is D 1.0 restorative nursing. We updated to current practice, which includes removing restorative nurses, TA, and 1-to-4 staff ratio, and adding that care should be at least 15 minutes a day daily for 6 out of the 7 days weekly. And that is our last policy. We're open for questions.
Thank you. Any public comment?
Yes. Folks, again, we're on item 7, Laguna Honda policies and procedures. If you'd like to make comment, please press *3. I see one hand. I want to make sure I don't see more. Okay. Mr. Manette-Shaw, you were unmuted.
Thank you, sir. The policies being presented today once again involve nursing policy D as in dog 1.0, nursing restorative care. I seem to recall this is the third time this year this policy has been presented for LHH JCC approval. Why does this policy keep requiring additional revision? Back in 2014, the Rehab Services Department's acting director, Jennifer Carton-Wade, made the unfortunate decision to transfer the rehab therapy aides from the rehab department to the nursing department. It's among major reasons Carton-Wade should not become an assistant nursing home administrator for care experience. In the nursing restorative care program, it hasn't functioned properly since it was rolled out when I worked in the rehab department for a decade, almost a decade ago. And it continues to flounder despite the interventions of Laguna Honda's quality improvement expert and the 2 co-incident commanders assigned to Laguna Honda during the past year. Sandra Simon, Laguna Honda's CEO, should investigate this program and investigate the restorative care level 1 program in rehab services. I want to thank Dr. Chow for saying that I was good at math, but in all honesty, when I was 16 or 17 in high school, 60 years ago, I was good at algebra, but when I got to trigonometry, I wasn't so good at math anymore. So thank you, Dr. Chow, for the shout out, but math really is not my forte. Thank you.
Okay, that's the last comment, the only comment.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and your input. And I'll turn to my colleagues, see if there are any questions or comments. Oh, okay. Commissioner Green, go ahead.
Yes, well, I believe Commissioner Chow and I had both submitted some questions to you, and many of them, a few were grammatical, many of them were clarifications, and maybe they don't belong in policy, but I guess there were 2 or 3 things that I was interested in. One is there was a section where it implied that if a San Francisco resident was hospitalized, for example, injured in a car accident in San Mateo, that they would not have priority for admission to Laguna for rehab services over somebody who, for example, was not a San Franciscan but ended up at the General and then was to be transferred. So I wonder if we can clarify that, because admission number 2 is you're coming from the General. And admission number 5 is you're coming from out of county. But I think that it might be helpful to clarify that, just so if someone read that and took it literally, that we understand that San Francisco residents have priority even if they happen to be disabled in a different county in the area.
Yes, thank you. So I saw that on the list of questions. And I don't know if staff is on the line now prepared to answer. I know they are getting an answer to that question, because it does seem strange the way it's worded. So I don't know if anyone on the line has an answer now, but the plan is to make sure we get that clarification back to you later this week if we don't have it tonight. So I'll pause for the staff to whom this was assigned the response.
And if I can quickly interject, today the committee will consider recommending to the full commission, and hopefully by the time the full commission has this, some of these answers will be there. So not to take away the importance of this discussion, but because the timing of all the other work the staff's doing.
And I believe I signed this because the admission process is governed by the admission committee, which consists of physicians and nurses. I believe I signed this to Dr. Ratana Wansler, Dr. Hu, and then our Department of Care Coordination in terms of the admission process, and that's Irene. So if they're on, have at it.
I see Dr. Hu is on.
Dr. Hu, are you there? And
I am here, thank you.
I don't know if you heard the question.
Yes. I actually don't have a good answer for that. I do think that we need to talk about it at care coordination, because that in fact has happened in the past. One of the criteria though that we consider is if somebody is in a safe place, then we know that they are safe and we can lower their priority a little bit if we are struggling for beds. But it has been people in San Francisco, no matter where their original home is, that we have prioritized in the past. And I think that's also to help with the flow of the network as well. But you raise a very excellent point that we want people who have supported Laguna Honda and who have their home and their families and their loved ones here. We would like them to be able to have equal, at least, priority for that.
Thank you. And, you know, apropos all the work you're doing right now, I would hope that maybe we can bring these things up, and when the dust settles, perhaps we can elaborate, because I don't think policies need to be amended other than a few grammatical things, but I think appending more details to a few of these things, and I think Commissioner Chow and I put them on the list, I think would be helpful. The other area that I thought could use further work is this whole issue of handoffs, both from institution. I just recall in so many instances where we haven't gotten full information from the acute care hospital for one of our, someone coming for an admission. And it's a propitious time to think that through, since we will be restarting admissions, but also sometimes when some of our residents go out and come back, there may not have been a clear-cut handoff. And then of course, if we move residents, we've seen that issue with the IJ, that having more clarification about, you know, what boxes need to be checked in handoffs and what needs to be received and have time to review before you actually have a resident come to the institution. I think, you know, living in the world of handoffs myself at the hospital, I think that's absolutely critical. I know there have been times I haven't been told things and I've been very sorry. I only found them out in retrospect. And then the last thing that would, I think, be helpful to clarify is the restorative nursing program. I personally find it kind of confusing, and as you said earlier, as we asked about these positions, maybe if there's an elaboration on that, because it would be useful for us to understand it, since it is something that the public is quite concerned about. And so, you know, and then anything else, I don't think it's appropriate for this meeting, but maybe you can just look at the comments and think them through.
Sure. And if Terry's on, I can have her kind of describe the restorative nursing program, if you like, now, or we can address it in the formal request. But she can actually give you the update of how it's transitioned from what it was to what it is now. So, Terry, if you're on.
Sure. Hi, Commissioners. Thank you. So restorative is now, it's in transition right now. We are having, we have nurses and we have PCAs and CNAs. We are having nursing. We are in the process of hiring the complementary staff to support the practice of restorative nursing. We're also working with our colleagues in rehab to make sure that we're supporting each other's work. Probably by the end of, we're hopeful in October we'll be fully functional the way we were. That's based upon getting the staff hired and then trained. But in the meanwhile, we continue to have restorative nursing. People are referred. We have activity aides working with us. We have PCAs and licensed nurses.
Terry, can you talk about how traditionally that the program was set up so that individuals who were receiving services within the rehab department itself, once they met their established rehab goals, the goal of restorative nursing within the nursing ranks is to make sure that they don't lose function when they get discharged from formal rehab and are only back on their units. And so the program that Terry just described is making sure then that the team she just mentioned is to make sure then that functional capacity is maintained once they are officially discharged from rehab, which is down on the first floor. So I hope that helps to.
Yes, and let me just add to that. Our job is when rehab has optimized them to the level where they feel that they're optimized, we need nursing to ensure that we don't lose ground. And so nursing will ensure that we do all the interventions to make sure that they stay optimized at the functional level and hopefully even improve that level. So it's a shared, combined, resident-centric program that keeps the resident in the center and has all the disciplines around them. And so it's the time for nursing to ensure that we're keeping our residents optimized to their highest potential.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Now I understand better. Appreciate it.
I think that the key will be, as this sort of new flow is implemented, that the monitoring of that and the consistency, particularly around the handoffs from rehab back to the neighborhood, is really sort of monitored. And I don't know how that monitoring will occur, like with everything else, but I think that is something, because it sounds ideal, and it would be something that could otherwise be sort of a showcase if it really is successful.
Absolutely.
And just to answer that question, I can tell you that one of our milestones is to monitor our restorative program. We do chart audits. We audit all of the different residents that are in restorative to ensure that we're maintaining the level that we are intended to. If people fall back, is it a decline in health, or was it something that we needed to re-educate? Or if they move forward, we'll re-engage rehab again and say, hey, we've optimized them here, maybe they can do more. So that's in process.
Great. So we'll make sure that we are documenting that whole process and reporting and keeping the commission and the JCC updated.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Antoni, for answering that. Commissioner Chow.
Yes, and thank you, and knowing the workload that you all have and understanding their need, I'll also wait for some written, like Commissioner Green said, some of my comments were related to clarification within the document, especially if we're going to be putting them on a consent calendar. There's methods to be determined yet on some of the new policies, and those should be filled in before we approve them. The restorative nursing, I think, also then merits this continued review, because within the document there seems to be some confusion, at least to the reader, in terms of who is who. I mean, one is listed as a restorative nurse, and there are other people. Anyway, those can be clarified. I think the basics of what you're talking about is certainly acceptable within the guidelines, in my opinion. I did find also, as Commissioner Green did, I'm not sure that the third priority makes some sense, that if I'm not in a medical facility but I'm really getting adequate care, why they would be prioritized above somebody who might be, well, it says San Francisco Medical Facility, but suppose that's somebody who actually does need to move into skilled nursing. So I think as you're looking at the priorities, perhaps, right now from a policy standpoint, if that's what the policy is, I think it's a review, but not necessarily saying that we're not going to pass this policy, but that it should be reviewed again for consistency. I do think there's a very major issue under your new policy, PHI security, which I do think really we have to clarify before we pass it, recommend for passing. The procedure for transferring a device says reasonable efforts to remove or otherwise make PHI unobtainable. And I would submit that we should never submit merely reasonable efforts as being sufficient. Never should a device be until we feel confident that PHI is not unattainable. And I really think that line should be changed.
Could you give the page number, Commissioner Chow, just to help everyone?
Sure. That's under the document with under PHI security, under your new document, which I think is, let's see, PHI security is...
It's number 15 on this thing.
Well, it actually isn't numbered here. It's the third from the bottom of the index. And the reference I'm doing is saying under procedure 3, I think it's in regards to transfer of devices that contain PHI. That I think the word I object to is reasonable, because we should never be releasing PHI.
Nas, do you have that notes that Dr. Chow?
Yes, we'll follow up with it's a departmental policy for the biomed engineering team. I will say our city attorneys do often share with us to use the term reasonable, just to, in that rare event that something should happen, it covers the facility. But I hear what you are saying, and I'll be sure to pass that back to the team for their policy.
Right. I mean, it might be the city attorney has a different interpretation of the word reasonable, but from a lay standpoint, it just sounds like, we tried our best, sorry, but we're just going to pass it on. I mean, we've done everything we know, but, we're aware that there still is the possibility. I mean, to me, that's not reasonable.
Absolutely. So we'll take that back.
So it may just be a wording issue.
No problem.
Thank you.
Of course.
Otherwise, I'll just, when you're able to respond to some of the others, just for clarification, that would be fine.
Absolutely.
So given that there are, I think, some fairly serious questions about at least a couple of these, one being the prioritization of transfer, and then the other around the PHI, I'm just wondering how we can proceed to approve all of the, recommend the policies for approval to the full commission, but can we do that if at least these two concerns that have been raised are going to be sort of addressed in the meantime. Will we have an opportunity to look at new language around, for instance, the PHI concern, as well as a clarification around the non-resident resident injury or issues? I just want to make sure that when we recommend approval, that the full commission knows that there are at least a couple of these concerns for clarification.
Absolutely. So Naz, how do you can address that?
Yes, absolutely. We can, well, I guess I would ask a learning question of, would it be, Carmen and I are in the process right now to get that sent back to the owner and revised and updated. We can then pass that back to Mark so that you can see it before next Tuesday, if that would be helpful. And then the clarification point, that will be part of the follow-up in the list of questions that will come as well. I see the team actively working in the document to make sure that point is very clear for you all.
So maybe we can entertain a motion for approval pending the clarification of these items. And then if they're not clarified prior to the full commission meeting, we're going to have to note that.
That's a possibility. That's your choice. That's your
That would be
purview.
my recommendation for a motion, if I could hear that motion. Yeah.
Yes, I would move that we approve policies with expected elaboration on the items that we brought up on in comment today and some of the others on the list.
Is there a second to that?
Yeah, I would second that, and I would assume that as we move it forward, if we're not satisfied, we could actually pull those from the consent
Yeah.
calendar and ask for discussion of that.
Yeah, because we don't want to hold up the full set of policies and procedures. And it
Thank you for
appears
that.
that the clarifications are things that can be addressed,
Yes.
hopefully prior to next week. So we'll do that then. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that you're really busy, but hopefully these won't be too taxing on the owners of the policies to clarify. Great.
All right, commissioners, the next item is closed session. Have consideration for closed session.
Okay,
So moved.
Second.
is there public
And
comment?
before you vote, there is public comment. Let's see, we will unmute Mr. Minette Shaw. Mr. Minette Shaw, you're unmuted. Please let us know that you're there.
I'm sorry, what's the agenda item?
Closed session.
No, I'm going to let you guys go off to closed session without any more chewing on your ear.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now you all can vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, give me 30 seconds to move several folks on the line. We will be back if you'd like to wait. In the meantime, you will not see or hear us while we are in. Okay, we are back into open session. Commissioners, please consider a motion to disclose or not disclose discussions held in closed session.
Move not to disclose.
I would second not to disclose.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then a consideration for
To
adjournment.
adjourn.
I would move adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you all and good night.
good night and goodbye. Thanks, everybody.